Welcome to Bodkins Curiosity Shop, where you'll find the unique, the bizarre, and sometimes the haunted. Feel free to look around, peruse the items, and never fear. There's nothing here that bites. Hard, anyway. Hello there. So wonderful to see you return to Bodkins Curiosity Shop. I am your shopkeeper, Chris Baker, and today you find us a little unprepared as we are trying to do some cleanup. I've got my clerk Mordecai in the back cleaning up. We were the target of a social media challenge. Apparently, a group of teenagers thought it would be amusing to rush into the shop, disturb the artifacts, perchance even steal some, and then leave quick as they came in, videoing it all on social media. Unfortunately for them, this shop does have a mind of its own, and as this group of teenagers tossed items about and began stealing others, areas of the walls opened as slithering, sloshing tentacles reached out from some other realm, grasping, choking, and squeezing these unsuspecting teens before pulling them to some unknown destination. We really should put up a warning about our security system. Children should learn not to play games at Bodkins Curiosity Shop, and therein lies the essence of today's episode of Bodkins Curiosity Shop. So let's pull out the kinetoscope and take a look at the new Shudder original, Elevator Game. So Elevator Game is one of those movies that came out on Shudder this past week, and I've known about it for a little while now. Usually at the beginning of the year, I kind of go through and research all the big movies and all the movies at that point that I know that are coming out that I want to check out to possibly do an episode on the podcast, whether it be horror, fantasy, science fiction. But periodically throughout the year, usually every 2 to 3 months, I'll research because movies that weren't planned at the beginning of the year or weren't announced at the beginning of the year show up as the year goes on. So this is one of those movies that I saw it was coming out on Shudder probably a couple months ago, and I thought, I'll check it out. I didn't really know anything about it, but I knew it was a horror film. I knew it was coming out on Shudder, and like I've said in the past, I mean, the last 2 years, I believe, definitely 2022, 2021, I think was a pretty good year for Shudder and Shudder Originals. So I thought this has a potential to be good. I know this year has been kind of, I can't even say hit or miss with Shudder Originals. It's been mostly miss for me with Shudder Originals, but we are getting closer to Halloween. And in October, that's really when Shudder pulls out all the stops and brings out the big guns when it comes to Shudder original horror films. So I thought, we're getting closer to Halloween. Maybe this one will be better than the rest, as, you know, they're starting to gear up to, you know, the prime time of the year for Shudder to put out original horror films. And I have to say right off the bat that this movie didn't wow me. It didn't stun me. It wasn't a great horror film, but I think it was a pretty good horror film. It was one of those movies where I think they had some really good ideas, and I think they got a lot of really good acting out of these young, virtually unknown actors. And I think the director is a director that I've had on my radar for a while as being one of those that I can't wait to see what they come out with next, because they've had a really good track record. And we'll get into all the nuts and bolts of that. But for the most part, Elevator Game, and we're going to get spoilery here in a little bit. But right now, I'm going to try to keep things as unspoilery as possible for anyone that hasn't watched this movie and would like to. The Elevator Game, the basic premise is that there is this urban legend. It goes like this. You go to an elevator, it can be any elevator, and you push a particular sequence of floors. Once you get to the second to the last floor that you're supposed to hit, it's always floor number 5, and when you get to floor number 5, you have to close your eyes, because if you open them and you see or speak to this spirit that is supposed to come into the elevator with you, they will rip you apart. So if you keep your eyes closed, then the door shuts on floor 5, and then you can continue with the sequence, which there is only one more floor. You hit floor number 1, and instead of going to floor number 1, it's supposed to take you all the way up to floor number 10, which is the third to last floor that you go to in the original sequence, but it'll take you there, and it's supposed to open up a portal to another dimension, a red world, if you will, where this spirit lives, known as the fifth floor girl, or I don't know. I didn't like that because it really, the whole fifth floor didn't really have anything to do with the lore behind the girl. And we'll get into that in the spoilery section. But this group of teenagers, they're fresh out of high school. They're like many teenagers that are trying to be famous on social media. They've got their own little web show where they go and do these scary challenges and, trying to make a name for themselves. They don't want to have to go to college. They don't want to have to go work a real job. So they're trying to be famous. And that's what I think the basic premise of this movie is. It's dealing a lot with social media challenges, TikTok challenges, urban legends and urban myths, and fame chasing to a lesser degree. There's not really a lot of that in this, other than the fact that these kids are trying to make their way in the world through social media. But then when someone doesn't play the game right, a spirit is unleashed on them all and terror ensues. Kind of a broad base description of this plot. And I have to say, for the most part, it wasn't a bad movie. Like I said, I thought the acting was really good. We'll get into the actors here in a little bit, but there's not a lot to say other than how much I liked the job they did, because really only one of them has been in anything that I'm aware of. Not any movies that I watched, but I probably should have watched them. We'll discuss that here briefly once we get into the spoilery section. But I think the cast was really good. I enjoyed all the characters, and these characters are, very stereotypical characters for this type of movie. You have the asshole Chris, who is kind of like the star, and he's kind of a dickhead, played by Alec Carlos, who does a really good job. He's the one. He's been in a couple films. He was in Orphan First Kill, which I know of it. I never watched it. Tales from the Hood 3, which came out in 2020. Again, a movie I'm aware of. Never actually watched it. He did a couple episodes of Tales from the Loop, a series that I wanted to watch and never watched. So now that I've seen him, and he does a really good job at playing an asshole in this movie. And I liked his performance. The character is a character that you can't wait to see them meet their untimely demise. Then there's Izzy, played by Madison McIsaac. Does a really good job. She is the rich girl, but she's not snooty. She's not stuck up. She plays a rich girl you can actually like. Now, I'm probably going to butcher this actor's name, Nazari Demkovich. He plays Maddie. He's kind of like the nerdy guy who is afraid of everything, but he knows a lot about the occult, stuff like that. He does a really good job with this character. The character felt like it was going to be annoying at some points, but he did a really good job, pulling back when he needed to. There's Kevin. He's kind of like the brains of the operation and the money, getting all the sponsors and stuff like that. He does a fine job. Then there's Verity Marks, who plays Chloe. She was really good in this. Really kind of the star of the show that I thought was an excellent actor, and kind of looking for, I think all of them, I was really looking forward to seeing them in more things in the future. But this guy in particular, Gino Anania, hopefully I'm pronouncing that right, plays Ryan. He's, he does a really good job with this character, kind of like the new guy with some ulterior motives. So all of these actors really good, and probably one of the best parts of this movie. I think the effects were pretty good. They did a lot of practical effects. They did some like CG effects that weren't horrible, because I think they stayed away from CG blood for the most part, or at least squirting, splurting CG blood. That's always when it's the worst, or dripping CG blood. Always horrible. I don't care. I mean, you could spend a ton of money and probably make it look good, but if you're not spending a ton of money, it looks horrible always. But they didn't do a lot of that, so I think that worked. In the one scene that they may have, it actually worked for the scene because it was very quick. We'll get into that in the spoiler section. But yeah, it's got a lot of good scares, good effects. It has some decent kills. I think there's a couple really interesting kills. It's got a little bit of gore to it. It's got some mythology that I don't think always works, but it's still an interesting idea. And it had a couple really creepy scenes. Now, for a horror movie, I wish this had more scares and more creepy scenes in it. And that's probably one of my biggest drawbacks, that it wasn't as scary as I was hoping it would be. And I think a lot of this movie gets lost in itself. It's an hour 34 minutes, but I think there's a lot of time taken up with dialogue that just isn't necessary. And the story kind of meanders in some aspects, where they could have spent a little more time in another area of this film that I think would have better served the creepiness, better served the atmosphere, and better served the movie as a whole. Again, I'll get a little more into detail with that coming up in the spoiler section. But if you haven't watched Elevator Game on Shudder, I think it's worth a watch. It's got a lot of good things going for it. Not a great movie, but not a horrible movie. And I've heard some people saying they really like it. Some people saying it's trash. I can't, you can make a point for either one of those. I tend to lean more towards it's an all right movie. And it still leaves me hoping that Shudder will really wow us, kind of like they did last year with some of the movies that they came out. One of those being from this director, Rebecca McKendry, directed this, and she and her husband, Dan, had both directed Glorious, which came out on Shudder last year, which was a fantastic movie. This one wasn't quite up to that level, but again, we'll talk a little more about that in the spoiler section. So if you haven't watched Elevator Game, go check it out on Shudder now. It's definitely worth at least a watch. And I think you might even enjoy some aspects of it. You're probably not going to enjoy the whole thing. Like I didn't. There were a lot of things I didn't enjoy about this, but there were a lot of things I did, which made it entertaining. And that is what I want. I want to be entertained. So go watch Elevator Game on Shudder, then come back, listen to my thoughts. But from here on out, we are going to talk about this movie, and there are going to be a lot of spoilers. So, like I said, this movie, Elevator Game, directed by Rebecca McKendry. Now, usually she does work with her husband, David Ian McKendry. They did a couple movies that I really loved, like Glorious, which came out last year. They also did All the Creatures Were Stirring, a Christmas horror anthology. And one of the things I really loved about their directing and the movies they make is that they do a lot with little. All of these are fairly low budget horror films, but they really amp up a lot of atmosphere. Like All the Creatures Were Stirring, there's a lot of low budget feel to that movie, but all the stories were really good and really compelling. And outside, I think it was the first story in All the Creatures Were Stirring, felt really cheap. I think that's the one where they're in the office. But anyway, the rest of the stories in that movie, I thought, looked bigger budget than they probably were, and really dealt with a lot of interesting stories and a lot of interesting topics and a lot of interesting areas of horror. And they were filmed very well. Glorious is another one where it's essentially a chamber play. It all takes place in this rest stop bathroom. For the most part, 95% of this movie takes place in this one area, and it is mainly all just dialogue between the two actors that are involved in this. And it could have been boring, but it wasn't. It was very intriguing and engaging, and the story was very captivating. So they had a really good track record with this team up between Rebecca and David McKendry. They didn't team up with this on the directing, although David McKendry was a part of the writing team. David Ian McKendry, along with Travis Sepala, who I'm not terribly familiar with, and Rebecca McKendry directed this. And I have to say, from a directing standpoint, I thought the movie was directed very well. It was shot very well. There's some good shots. Nothing that's going to blow your mind. But I really enjoyed what she brought to the table, because from a quality standpoint, and this is another low budget film that felt bigger budget than it probably was. I think where this film fell apart was in some predictability with the story, some trying to do too much with the story. I think it was all in the storytelling that took me out of it. The movie opens up with this girl playing the elevator game and meeting her untimely demise. And then we go to these kids that are doing this internet show where they go around and they take part in a lot of these scary, creepy challenges and games, urban legends, stuff like that. And then all of a sudden, from out of nowhere, they get a new guy. He's an intern. He's going to do this for free. He wants to come and be a part of this because he's a fan of the show. And I don't know, maybe like 2 minutes into this character being introduced, I'm like, oh, this is the brother of the girl that got killed in the first scene. If I spoiled that for you, I told you there were going to be spoilers. Which, that is kind of a staple of horror films. The avenging sibling or the avenging family member that's trying to find out what happened at the hands of some sort of serial killer or slasher or what have you. I mean, we've seen that before. And I'm one that I'm not going to bitch because a tried and true trope of a horror is being used yet again, because we've seen it 100 times. We'll probably see it 1,000 more. So I didn't mind that, but I saw it coming a mile away, as I'm sure you did. The problem I had with that, though, is that he is trying to steer them towards doing this elevator game so he can find out about his sister. And then when the truth comes out that he's doing this to find his sister, everybody gets mad at him. His love interest, Chloe, gets mad at him. And then we got to spend the whole time of them trying to make up. And they didn't spend a ton of time on it, but anytime they did spend on, having to have dialogue where she doesn't trust him anymore, that just took away from doing things in other areas that we'll talk about coming up that would have been more interesting. Even the whole first act of this movie and even the first scene of this movie where you're having this little meeting between all the members of this show and having to figure out why they have to play this game. Because they don't want to initially. It's a game they've heard about and they didn't think it was interesting enough, and they had to talk about that. And then they had to talk about all the reasons why they need sponsors, and they've all got apartments they've had to move into because they're not going to college and they need the money, and the sponsor's going to pull unless they get a show out right now, and just all this rigmarole of why they have to do this elevator game right now. And it seemed like way too much setup for something that could have been done a lot more simple. And like I said, leave you time in this hour 34 runtime to spend it on more interesting, scary things. Now, business really picks up once they finally do go to this hotel, or actually, I think it's an office building. And it's actually the office building that the Ryan character's sister was killed in that very first scene. So they're playing the game, and this is where the game gets kind of cocked up because somebody looks when they should have been closing their eyes on the 5th floor, and this unleashes the 5th floor girl. Again, I hate the name for that because it really has nothing to do with anything. I'll talk about that next, but I do want to talk about this. But this is really where things get creepy and get scary, because the spirit is unleashed and then starts kind of tracking all these kids down and killing them off one by one. It starts off with the Izzy and Kevin characters, which I thought was probably one of the best kills, because this spirit is supposed to walk into the elevator behind you while you're closing your eyes. And when they get to the 5th floor, they don't close their eyes, and they're like, oh shit, we got to close our eyes. So they close them. The spirit comes in and the door closes, and they're like, oh, nothing. And then all of a sudden this hand bursts through Kevin's neck, from the back to the front, and blood and guts and everything just flies everywhere. Well, maybe not guts, it's his neck. It was a good jump scare. It was good body horror. It was gross and gory. And I was really disappointed, though they did that. Then you really didn't see the Izzy character meet her untimely demise. You just kind of see her running back and forth in the elevator as the door closes. I was a little disappointed in that, because that could have made, and she was a character you liked. You didn't want to see her die, but this is a horror film, so why not? Why not show her death? Now, it's after this that we kind of do get some context, because the Chloe character, she's the one that's really into research. So she's pissed off at Ryan because Ryan lied to them about why he wanted to go to play this elevator game. And she's doing research on this fifth floor woman and the elevator game. This, I think, is an idea where they had the idea of the elevator game, this sequence of floors that you have to hit before you open up this portal to a new dimension. And I think they reverse engineered it. I think they had the idea of that. I think they had the idea of the fifth floor girl, where you have to close your eyes when you get to the fifth floor or the spirit's going to attack you. And then again, they had to reverse engineer, well, why would this spirit be here? Okay, they died on the elevator. And instead of having it die on the elevator on the fifth floor, that would have made sense why the fifth floor was significant. But no, they didn't do that, because they had her getting crushed underneath the elevator because she was a college pledge and she got locked under the elevator and it came down and squished her. But she didn't die there. She got caught in the gears and it ripped her apart. That's why if you don't close your eyes on the fifth floor, she rips you apart. Again, it was a little bit of putting the cart before the horse, or having the idea and then reverse engineering instead of having an idea of this character and, well, let's think of what would happen to this character to get us to where we need to be with the door opening up on the fifth floor and the portal to another dimension. Like I said, a lot of good ideas that I just don't think they connected all the dots completely with. But I think one of the best kills, maybe not the best kill, I really do think the Kevin kill was probably the best kill, but probably one of the most anticipated kills was the Chris character, played by Alec Carlos, who, like I said, he did a really good job of playing a dickhead and playing an asshole. And he was the one character that everyone else you liked. And he was the one character that you just didn't like. And you couldn't wait to see him get killed. And the scene was really creepy. Kind of having that shadow of the ghost move out from the shadows and him kind of rising off the floor and then being twisted around. It was gross and creepy. And that was one of the scenes that you really got some good atmosphere and some tension from. And maybe it wasn't terribly scary, but it was chilling. Maybe not as chilling as I wanted it to be, but it was chilling enough that it kind of creeped me out. The other scene that I thought was really creepy was the scene where Ryan goes into the elevator by himself to play the game, and he finally does open up the portal to this red world where the fifth floor girl lives. And he steps into it, and it was early on enough in the movie I thought, oh shit, this is going to go into like some other dimension stuff that I didn't expect with this movie. And I thought, oh, he's looking for his sister, Becky, and he's going to start exploring this world, and we're going to see what this alternate dimension is like, and why is it all red? And then they just didn't really do anything with that. Outside of the really cool scene where he's stepped out of the building in this alternate red dimension, which I wish it was a little more red. It felt like pink at sometimes. I thought it was the red world, not the pink world. But at any rate, he's standing there on this desolate street in the middle of the night, and he sees under a street light the silhouette of a girl that he thinks is his sister Becky. And it's not. And of course, if you saw the trailer, it's not, because you got to see some of that scene play out, which is a little disappointing because this is one of the creepier, scarier moments in the movie, and they gave it away. I'm coming to realize that studios that don't have any faith in a movie do that. They put in all the scares, or at least some of the big scares, some of the big benchmark moments for a movie. They put it in the trailer because they feel like that's the best moment. That's the moment that's going to draw people in. And it's going to draw people in hoping that, hey, that's just one of many scary scenes. And they're afraid that if they don't put that in, people aren't going to find it scary. And so let's just put all the scary moments in and wait till we've got people's money in our pockets before they realize that, no, those are the only really scary moments. But that, like I said, was one of the couple really seminal scary moments for this movie, and they gave it away. But it was still creepy, even though I'd seen it, because I watched the trailer before I watched this movie, and it was still creepy because it plays out longer. That's an excellent example of where Rebecca McKendry has some really good patience and some really good instincts when it comes to horror, and she lingers on this shot long enough to give you pause as to, maybe this is Becky. I'm pretty sure it's the fifth floor girl, but maybe it is Becky. And then all of a sudden that head swings back, like backwards, and is looking at him with the head flopped back. And then she starts walking towards him like that. And it's just creepy and unnerving. And it's got a very unearthly feel to it. And like I said, probably one of the scariest scenes in the movie for my bunny. I didn't talk about Maddie's death. I didn't really like that. It played for some humor when he's got everybody, him and Chloe and Ryan in the salt circle, and he thinks that's going to protect him from the ghost like he's in Supernatural or something. And then all of a sudden she steps across it and starts eating him, biting his neck, zombie style. It just wasn't very imaginative, I don't think. And I would have liked to have seen something a little more pizzazz. Because like I said, you had some really cool deaths early on. You had Kevin's death. You had Chris's death. Didn't really get to see much of Becky or Izzy's death, but I wanted something more. Maybe because we missed out on 2 deaths, really. I figured you had to go, all out with this. And then I think another issue I had with this movie was that the ending was a little unclear. And I'm fine with leaving, an ending with a question mark. That's not the problem here. It's just, I wasn't sure exactly what they were going for, because you had Ryan and Chloe figuring out that you play the elevator game, you open the portal, you have to play it again to close the portal. So they go to play the game and close the portal, and that's what they do. And then all of a sudden they realize that the fifth floor girl has changed the game, or that wasn't how you closed the portal. It was very unclear. It was unclear because you have the Chloe character dying. And like I said, again, a very lackluster death for her. And then it seems like Ryan's going to die. You hear his sister whisper his name, and kind of a cut to black, and the end question mark really is left. So I wasn't really sure because, like I said, they probably could have explored this red world a little more. I think that's probably one of my biggest regrets of this movie, is that I didn't get to see more of that. Ryan goes in there looking for his sister, but he sees the fifth floor girl and then gives up, abandons all hope, and heads back to the elevator. And he never really looks for his sister. And there's a moment when they do the elevator game again, and he sees the silhouette of his sister outside of this building that they're in, and never really seems to try to contact her. And I don't know where they were going with that. Whether they're trying to say that now that she's been brought into the red world by the fifth floor girl, that she is an evil spirit like her, or it's just a trick from the red floor girl that, Becky was not there at all. But this alternate dimension, this red world that the fifth floor girl lives in is something that I wish they really would have explored, because I thought that would have taken this to a different level, an unexpected level. This would have been a twist that I would have not seen coming from this movie, given the trailer that I watched or anything that I had read about it. And it would have taken it into I don't know, uncharted territory that I think all bets would have been off for me. Because for the most part, I was like, oh, I kind of see where this is going. Nothing really surprised me about this until they had Ryan open up this portal and go into the Red World. And that's where I was like, oh shit, this is not what I expected was going to happen at this point in the movie. I thought it was going to be like a Ninth Gate scenario where it's, the gate's not opened up until the very end of the movie, and then you get this ambiguous ending. I thought this was going to be something where they do open the gate, but it's like during the climax at the very end of the movie. And that's not what happened. So I was really disappointed that they didn't explore this world a little more. And if the idea that Becky was in there, it could have made that more of a focal point of this story, where instead of explaining to me why all these kids need money because they're in apartments they can't afford because they decided to do an internet-based web series instead of going to college or getting real jobs, I would have rather seen them kind of going into this red world and exploring that and the horrors that could have lay within. I would have rather seen that than seeing a bunch of kids bitching about the fact that they have rent that they can't pay. Believe me, kids, it doesn't end there. But while I did have some issues with the storytelling, they were just facets of this movie and this story that I just wish would have played out a little differently. I did like the cast. Like I said, I like the cast. I like the direction. I like the look of the movie. I thought the movie looked good. I thought the creature design on the Fifth Floor Girl was not groundbreaking, but it was just different enough that, when you got a good look, and you never really got a good look for long, it was very bizarre and, like I said, kind of almost otherworldly. The bugged out eyes and the split mouth, and it was pretty creepy. Now that I think of it, it kind of reminds me of the Lights Out short film that came out here, several years back. And they did the feature film of it, but it just wasn't as scary as the little short film but when you got the reveal of this creature in Lights Out, it kind of reminded me of the Fifth Floor Girl, or the Fifth Floor Girl kind of reminded me of it. So while it wasn't anything spectacular or, like I said, groundbreaking in creature design, it was a creepy enough creature design that when you did get a good shot of it made me kind of bristle up. So I liked that. The effects were pretty good. The practical effects, the CG wasn't bad. They didn't depend on CG a ton, so that really helped out this movie a lot. And I think those things, the cast, the effects, the look, the feel, it did have some really good scenes with a lot of creepy atmosphere. Maybe not a ton of scares, but enough scares that worked that I made me enjoy this as a horror film. Could have always been more. Could have always been better. But it wasn't terrible. And for me, that was enough for me to be entertained for the hour and 34 minutes that this movie ran, which never really felt like it was running too long. There may have been a couple points where the action kind of dipped down, where Ryan and Chloe meet on top of the building and they're having some dialogue and discussing things. I think things kind of slowed down a little too much there before, picking back up. But like I said, just when you thought it felt a little long, business picked back up, and I think the pacing was pretty good. I think this story just got weighed down by a little too much exposition early on in the film, and I think it was a lure to a game. I mean, the game was already kind of not complicated, but it involves some steps. And when you have a game that takes that much explaining, okay, you got to go to this floor, and then you got to go to that floor, and then you got to go to this floor, and you got to go to this floor, but you got to keep your eyes closed until the doors close, and then you got to go to another floor, and that will take you to a different floor, and then you'll go to another dimension. When you've got to explain the game like that, having to explain the lore behind the game about the Fifth Floor Girl and why she is the way she is, that's got to be concise, and it can't be complicated, and it can't be confusing. And it's, I think that's where it's got to make sense within the context of the game, and I just don't think it did. if you could have tied in some reason why the fifth floor was significant, I think that would have connected a couple dots that I felt was missing in this movie. But all in all, not the best film of the year, but not the worst film of the year. I enjoyed it well enough. I'll probably never watch it again, but I think it was like I said, an entertaining enough movie, and it was an entertaining enough idea. This, I think, is a movie that probably the last Shudder movie I talked about, and I can't even remember which one that is, which is sad to say because that's how much of an impact it left on me. But I think, this is a movie that could have used another draft, or maybe another writer to kind of help condense some ideas and make things a little more concise and streamlined a little better in the lore and the beginning of this film. I think the beginning of this film weighed down the rest of the film, and I think some of the lore weighed down the film. The acting, the look, the feel of it, the direction, I think is what brought this film back to me really liking it. And like I said, while I'll probably never watch this movie again, I am glad that I took the time to watch it when I did. And it was good enough that I'm excited to see what Rebecca McKendry and David McKendry have coming up next, because they're two filmmakers that, while I, thanks to this movie, haven't loved everything they've done, everything that I've seen so far, Glorious, All the Creatures Were Stirring, I loved both of those films. And even though this, I think, was a tiny step back, I'm still excited to see what those two directors and those two filmmakers have coming up next. So I want to thank everyone for listening to my thoughts on the Shudder original Elevator Game. You can check it out on Shudder right now. It came out this past Friday, I believe, and definitely worth a watch. You should at least take the time to watch it. Don't take what I say or don't take what anyone else says about it. Make up your own mind. Watch it and see what you think about it. And I think you'll enjoy it well enough. Even if you don't love it, there's enough of good in it to enjoy the movie, if you let yourself. So I want to thank everyone for listening to my thoughts on Elevator Game. Check us out on Odds Bodkins Curiosity Shop on social media. Facebook, we're always posting trailers and articles I find all over the internet from horror, fantasy, and science fiction. I like to add my 2 cents. A lot of other things we're posting as well. You can also check us out on Instagram. And no matter where you listen to this podcast, please follow it, like it, subscribe to it, whatever particular podcast of choice calls it. Do that. That way you can stay on top of all the new episodes, as well as leaving a review. 5 stars will be awesome, but whatever review you leave, we do appreciate that. And most importantly of all, share this podcast with anyone that you know that loves horror, fantasy, and science fiction, and help spread the word, help us build up our numbers so, we can keep doing this and talking about all the movies and TV series and books and music and anything that deals with horror, fantasy, and science fiction, so we can keep doing that, because this is what I really love to do. So I want to thank everyone for taking the time to listen, and until next time, thank you for visiting Odds Bodkins Curiosity Shop. We hope that you found something to your liking and visit the shop again soon. But even though you may come back, you never really get to leave Odds Bodkins Curiosity Shop. Ha 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 ha.